Welcome to Handmade Happenings. I'm Melissa, and today's video is an introduction to a new, I guess you could call it mini-series that is going to take place as a part of my mom's series on the channel, which is a handmade kitchen, which posts every month on the last Tuesday of the month. And we are calling it How to Cook Every Part of a Cow. So I'm really excited about this series because it has been an idea since long before I really ever seriously considered starting a YouTube channel. And that's because several years ago I had seen a series of videos here on YouTube about how to cook a whole chicken. And it started with buying a whole chicken and like the cost effectiveness of buying a whole chicken compared to buying all of the pieces separately. And then how to break down the chicken, cut all the pieces off of the whole chicken, and then individual videos going over how to cook each part. And in the comments of this series was a lot of jokes about, oh, next is going to be how to cook an entire cow. And for every comment that made that joke was somebody responding with like, oh no, that'll never happen. It's impractical. Nobody does it. Nobody can fit that in the freezer. Any reason you may have to object to this, it was probably in the comments. And I just read all of those and was like, we do that every year. And the reason we do that every year, if you haven't picked up on it, is that we do raise our own meat. And so when you do that, you tend to get all of the different parts of the cow, except maybe the organ meat. You usually have to request that from your butcher. But anyway, I'm going to let Mom get on here, since it is going to be on her show, and explain a little bit about kind of our journey with learning how to cook all of these different parts of meat, and then I will be back to give a few more specific details.
And we came to this journey from raising our own beef about 28 years ago. And when we first did this, and the side of beef came home in the box and we put it in the freezer, I had parts of the meat I'd never cooked before. Chuck roast? What's that? I didn't buy that at the store. Beef ribs? I was used to pork ribs, but not beef ribs. Then we had stew beef. Okay, well, that sounded like you just throw it in a pot and put in some vegetables and you got beef stew. Oh, not exactly. So there were parts that I was not familiar with cooking. I went to the store and it was like you buy a hamburger, buy some steaks, maybe a nice roast. Those I was pretty familiar with. But round steak, cube steak, chuck roast, beef ribs, stew beef. And it was like, do I really want to cook this meat? How do I cook it? Well, after years of trial and error and trying different recipes, the crock pot became my friend. And I have found that a lot of meat can be cooked in a crock pot on low and slow. So now people say, oh, chuck roast. It's like, yeah, that's a really good piece of meat. Put it in an iron skillet, sear it on both sides, a little bit of salt and pepper, throw it in a crock pot, low and slow, let it cook all day. It is just going to be fork tender. Same thing with beef ribs and stew beef. So we have learned over the years to really like every part of the cow. Still trying to like liver. I really want to like liver. It's supposed to be healthy for you. So we're actually going to try liver again this year. Growing a lot of onions, and I hear lots of onions help. So anyway, I hope you come along with us on this journey of cooking every part of a cow. And we hope to share some good recipes with you so that, hey, you won't be afraid when you get that side of beef in your freezer and go, chuck roast?
So obviously not everyone is going to be raising their own meat, but there are bulk options for buying meat, especially if you go to your local butcher. You could get like a half or a quarter of a cow, Or, you know, just if you go to the store and there happens to be cube steak on sale, you could save a little money and buy that when it's on sale and know that you're going to be able to go home and cook it. So our plan is just to go through the various cuts of meat and show you our favorite ways to cook that cut. And I do need to give a disclaimer because I have titled this series How to Cook Every Part of a Cow. And that is true from the standpoint of it's every part of a cow. However, that is not true from the standpoint of like every cut of meat. And that's because with beef, what you get when you process a cow can depend on your butcher. So to give an example, beef brisket is a cut of meat we don't get. Our butcher cuts it into stew beef, unless you request to have the brisket. We never have. So because of that, we are going with what is considered standard cut from our butcher, which is like just if we send a cow in to be processed and just tell them standard cut is what they would like kind of automatically do. It's kind of their baseline, and then if you want customizations, they will do it, but you have to request it. So those cuts of meat I will have up on screen so you can see them. And if you see a cut of meat and you hear the recipe and you know you go, oh, I really want to do it, but you can't find that meat, I would recommend first off Google, because very often we'll find recipes and it'll be like, we found one recently that calls for tri-tip. That's a cut of meat we don't get. So I Googled it and found a substitution. Oftentimes these substitutions come from like the same part of the cow, so they have similar qualities to them. And sometimes there are cuts of meat that just are called different things in different areas. So that's just something to note for this series. And the last thing to note as I'm wrapping up is that this is probably going to take a while. There's a lot of cuts of meat, though some of them will be combined because some of these mom cooks the same. For example, like shoulder roast and rump roast, I think she cooks about the same. T-bone and sirloin steak are usually cooked the same. So some of them will be combined, but we will also be breaking these up with like having other videos in between, because this is going to be part, I think I already said, of Handmade Kitchen, and therefore it's only a monthly upload, and I'm just not going to do 10 months in a row of beef recipes. So we'll be breaking it up with some other stuff, especially over the summer when our garden will be in full swing. Well, I think that's everything I needed to cover in this video. This mini-series is going to start this month on the last Tuesday of the month. We're starting with cube steak, which is definitely a good example of a piece of meat that we used to not like at all, to becoming a cut of meat that when we get beef back, it's almost one of the first cuts that I'm like, Mom, can we have cube steak?